After several months of planning, our trip began from the Kokopelli trailhead in Loma, Colorado. We left one of our trucks here and loaded up the other one with all four of us, bikes, and gear needed to complete the 3-day trip from Moab, Utah back to Loma. With extremely limited water on the Kokopelli, we decided the best option would be to cache water along the route. We ultimately did 3 different water drops as we drove the truck to Moab. At each location, we included about 7 liters of water per person in collapsible jugs that we could easily carry with us to avoid leaving trash on the trail. And with chores complete, we arrived in Moab around 10 o'clock at night to rest up for the big day tomorrow. Waking up in Moab, we were thrilled to see the continental breakfast and the festive decor at the hotel we were staying at. With Halloween only 2.5 weeks away, this got us super amped up to put the final touches on our bikes, get packed up, and begin pedaling. I had a variety of bags on my bike, including 2 top tube bags, 2 fork bags, 2 feed bags with 2 water bottles, a handlebar bag, seat bag, and frame bag with a 48-ounce Nalgene strapped to the bottom of my down tube. This setup allowed me to travel without a backpack and simply wear a fanny pack for some extra water space. Between the bags, I had room for 3 days worth of food, which was about 15,000 calories, and also room for about 7 liters of water. With that, we were packed up and ready to go. Traditionally, it seems like most people bike the Kokopelli Trail from Fruita to Moab. However, given we live in Colorado and are familiar with many of the trails in the area, we decided the best way to ride the route would be to get a shuttle from Moab to the top of LPS or Lower Porcupine single track. Getting a shuttle allowed us to shave off 3,000 feet of climbing and nearly 20 miles on a heavily used road in Moab. As a global mountain bike destination with many downhill-oriented trails, Moab has plentiful shuttles that are available for around $30 to get to this area. As we got to the top of the drop-off point for the shuttle, we were excited as we realized our trip had incidentally been planned around an annular eclipse. This led to some interesting lighting and shadows as we officially kicked off our adventure.
The boy's getting ready.
No sunscreen necessary.
Luke, your face is so white.
Is it really? Oh, I thought you said it wasn't white.
No, well, I wasn't watching. I was watching you put the first thing of it.
Hit and start. It is 10:21.
Spirits were high as we began pedaling up the easy, well-maintained gravel of Sand Flats Road, which eventually would run into the Kokopelli Trail. Our goal was to bike about 52 miles and 6,500 feet of climbing to get to our second water drop at Dewey Bridge. While this was a lofty goal for the day, the use of the shuttle allowed us to get an additional 3,000 feet of descending, a total of 10,000 feet going downhill, if we were to make it all the way to Dewey Bridge. Right here and for the next 2-ish miles are the Kokopelli segment of the world-famous Whole Enchilada Trail. This trail attracts over 7,000 riders annually, with nearly 100% of them traveling in the opposite direction, which made for some spicy interactions. Next up, we had about 2,000 feet of fast descending on a very pretty stretch of highway called the La Salle Loop, which skirts around the La Salle Mountains. With most of our journey being in the desert, it's crazy to think that some of the peaks in these mountains received over 500 inches of snow last year. With it being mid-October, the aspens at this elevation also had started to turn yellow and were almost prime time. After going down, we climbed right back up to the highest point of the entire trip at 8,603 feet. There was an excellent overlook as we crested the summit, which was a great spot to take a breather and obtain some views of Bull Canyon. We didn't hang out for too long though, knowing we were still less than 16 miles into the day and had a lot of riding left to do. The road turned into smooth, maintained gravel for a few miles as we dropped about 800 feet of elevation. We had a brief climb up to the Polar Mesa segment of the trail. The plants in this area started to change rapidly from predominantly coniferous trees to endless miles of sagebrush, which is very typical of the higher elevation deserts of this area. This area became much more remote and much more fun as we started to descend. Lost a water bottle. Just a reminder to always batten down the hatches and make sure all of your gear is secure. The next few miles were some of my favorite of the entire trip. Given the shuttle and the climbing we did earlier, we were able to enjoy an excellent descent on some very fun double track. This area was called Hideout Canyon. We saw some great scenery with few cars, bikers, or any other people in general. We then came to the best viewpoint, in my opinion, of the entire trail. A great place to stop for a photo and test for an echo.
Fertility! 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 Fertility!
I figured my call would provide us with luck for the trip, given the Kokopelli is thought to be a fertility deity that originated from the native people that lived in areas near here thousands of years ago. As we got to the bottom of Hideout Canyon, we had done almost 3,000 feet of descending and were now at an elevation of 5,700 feet. This led to further changes in the landscape and even a large puddle to cross. Next up, we approached a short but very steep climb to get up and out of the canyon. While the climb wasn't long and wasn't steep enough to need to walk our bikes, it was challenging to pedal our 60 to 70 pound bikes plus gear up to the top. After the summit, we then got on the Onion Creek segment, which traversed along the bottom of Fisher Valley, and the road became surprisingly smooth. We also approached our first water drop. At this location, we stashed 20 liters, which was enough to top off all of our storage vessels on our bikes and then some. It was about 4:30 in the afternoon at this time, and sunset was in about 2 hours. We had biked 33 miles on the day so far, and it would be almost 20 more miles to get to our goal destination of Dewey Bridge. Given our average pace of 7 to 9 miles an hour, we were definitely not going to make it that far. We wanted to push on though and get as far as we could so the next day we wouldn't have such an enormous effort. At the same time, we encountered some of the most technical aspects of the entire trail. While most everything was easy enough to descend, the hike-a-bike that came up next was a bit of a buzzkill and our pace slowed down dramatically. The hike-a-bike was fairly short-lived though, and we were shortly able to resume pedaling. Unfortunately, now the sun was in our eyes, and over the next 2 miles we would climb about 1,000 feet of very technical double track to the top of the Cottonwood segment of the Kokopelli Trail. Eventually, we got to the top of the climb, which led us to an amazing camp spot just before sunset. About wrapped up with day one. Got a little bit ahead of the team. Probably camped somewhere very close to here. Pull my finger. Everyone was super relieved to be done biking for the day. We set up our tents, changed clothes, and began preparing dinner for the evening. Looking at the totals for the day, we biked almost 42 miles, climbed about 6,100 feet, and descended just over 7,000 feet. Our total time on the bike was 7 hours and 42 minutes, with our moving time being about 5.5 hours. Average moving speed for the day was 7.7 miles per hour. What's for dinner at Camp Joe?
Fettuccine Alfredo, the chicken, and not this thing.
Chicken Alfredo.
Pasta.
Wow, we got some Alfredo. Hey, I got mango sticky rice for dessert too.
Oh yeah?
Set up. So far it looks a little low.
Yeah.
Jordan took advantage of the pit that previous travelers had created to put together a nice fire for the evening, which created an opportunity for us to rest our legs, talk about the day, and prepare for tomorrow. Day 2 begins after a surprisingly cold night that dipped down to almost 32 degrees Fahrenheit. I stayed in my tent for a few minutes to warm up my instant coffee mixed with hot chocolate, and we made a small fire as the sun peeked over the eastern horizon and began to break down camp. First day bikepacking, Joe, what'd you think?
Amazing.
Amazing?
Yeah. I know. I had
He's back for round 2. By 9 o'clock, we were off, beginning the day on the top of the world segment of the Kokopelli Trail. Okay, actually maybe it is that road, that way. Kicking things off, we got a little bit turned around on what direction we needed to go, but eventually we found the right path forward. With over 2,000 feet of descending in the first 10 miles of the day, this segment was a great way to warm up for the pedaling that was to come. Given the descending, I took this opportunity to swap bikes with Austin and see how his hardtail handled the Kokopelli Trail. Interestingly enough, between 4 different guys, we had 4 different bike setups. 3 were full suspension with 27.5, 26, and 29-inch wheels between them. Austin's bike was a hardtail. This was plenty adequate and maybe even the recommended bike for the Kokopelli Trail given the pedally segments. I would never consider riding a gravel bike or anything lighter out here though. This is definitely mountain bike territory. After descending for a few easy miles, we arrived at a more technical section of this segment. The trail was generally downhill though, and very rideable, except for a few extra spicy sections. Even with the increased rocks and obstacles in the trail, this was an incredibly beautiful part of the Kokopelli, with the path running through different canyons, drainages, and other scenic areas. This was definitely one of my favorite areas we traveled through. Right around this corner, we actually found a side-by-side that had just driven off this cliff and was getting rescued by a tow truck. Pretty crazy situation, but it looked like they had it handled, so we continued on our way. At this point in time, we had been bikepacking for over 24 hours and surprisingly had not seen a single other biker. We approached this group of bikepackers going the other way, which was the only group we saw on the entire trip. This is quite interesting, as based on our research, it seems like most people prefer to ride the Kokopelli in the opposite direction, from Fruita to Moab. However, with our biking going the way it is, I can't imagine it making more sense to go in the opposite direction, and I'll get into some of those things later in the video here. We are now approaching Dewey Bridge, which used to be the longest suspension bridge in Utah until 2008, when a 7-year-old boy accidentally started a fire nearby while playing with matches. The fire moved up the riverbank and destroyed the bridge's wooden deck and rails, and now only scraps of the bridge remain. Our water was hidden over here underneath Highway 128, and it came at a perfect time as we were all very low and needed to fill up.
Oh no. Oh! One of the jugs got a hole in it.
Even though we lost about 8 liters of water, we still had plenty to get us to our next stop about 40 miles away. As we started filling up the water vessels on our bikes, I unfortunately realized that my drink mix had exploded in one of my bags, coating my food in a sticky mixture and losing a number of my calories on the way. Just a reminder to be sure you pack your gear for bumpy trails, which I clearly did not do in this situation. Nonetheless, this was a great place to stop, a well-established campground. We were able to drop off some trash, clean up, and get back on the trail in fairly short order. This started with a brief pedal across the Colorado River on Highway 128, followed by a left turn onto the Owl Draw segment of the trail. With the recent stop, each of our bikes were now carrying 5 to 7 additional liters of water. This added 10 to 15 pounds to our bikes. Even though this added weight was annoying, it was a better option than trying to frequently filter very silty water from the Colorado River. Given the proximity of this segment to the highway, you could easily do a day ride here. The next 9 miles were some of the most fun, interesting, and scenic of the entire ride. Reaching the higher elevations of the Owl Draw segment became slowly less and less technical. The trail took on a maintained gravel appearance, and the scenery became overall less scenic, with less slick rock, cliffs, and overall less splendor as earlier parts of the trail. The road eventually crosses Highway 128 again, and then a right turn takes us right back onto the Kokopelli Trail. The next few miles were relatively smooth, easy double track, and eventually we connected onto some single track. One of the interesting things about the Kokopelli Trail is that it was created in 1989 by early mountain bike enthusiasts who were excited by the possibility of a cross-country route that connected Fruita, Colorado to Moab, Utah. Most of the route was created using existing roads, but this next segment of single track was created specifically by bikers in collaboration with local land agencies. With rules and regulations, it is becoming increasingly difficult to build new long-distance bikepacking type routes that incorporate new trails. Nonetheless, it is impressive that the Colorado Plateau Mountain Bike Trail Association was able to make this route a reality, and it is enjoyed by many bikers every year. As we started biking again after a quick break, my hose, unfortunately, that connected to my water storage bladder came undone and got caught in my spokes. Had to turn around quick to see if I could find the nozzle for that and reattach it. Fortunately, I lost a little water and we were able to begin biking again shortly. We wrapped up the Cisco Pump House segment of the Kokopelli Trail and then turned left onto a paved road, County Road 177. We stayed on this for a casual 2 to 3 miles before turning right again to get onto gravel. At which point, Austin somehow immediately found a way to get a flat tire, and the only flat tire or real major incident we had of the trip.
Oh, it's pretty big.
Let's give it a I'm sorry. Hey, you like your shins? Here, I'll go the other way. That'd make more
After
sense.
taking advantage of the opportunity to smack Austin's shin with his pedal, we were able to quickly fix the tire and get back on the road within 5 minutes. The next 10 miles were some of the least scenic and least exciting of the entire trip. It was very smooth gravel, easy rolling, but this was actually quite nice as it was a way to quickly cover a number of miles and also kept us on track for our distance goal for the day. Over here we are getting onto Westwater Road, which is a paved segment that should connect to directly where we dropped our water.
Hell yeah.
Unfortunately though, instead of looking at the map, we saw a sign that said the Kokopelli Trail was to the right. We saw the single track for the trail and got on it. Even though this was the actual Kokopelli Trail, little did we know we were actually heading in the wrong direction, away from where our water drop was.
And I think said turn right there. Not gonna do that. I think I drew the map wrong.
Okay, but to get to where we want to go, we're about to...
Okay.
According to my...
Yeah, you're right. Let me pull up my phone. Oh shit. We passed the water drop.
Oh, no way.
We're... Look. I mean, it's not that far back. It's about 1.5 miles from here, but we dropped the water right there.
This costly error meant we needed to backtrack about 1.5 miles to get to where our water was. This was unavoidable, obviously, given we needed the hydration to make it through the night and the next day. Thankfully, we noticed this when we did, and it only added an additional 3 miles and 450 feet of climbing to the biking we did for the day. With 30 liters of water at this location, we had more than enough to top off all of the vessels on our bikes and even cool down our heads from the warm day.
Hey, slap the bag. Thank you. Oh, yeah.
This did a lot to boost our spirits as the sun was getting low in the sky, and we definitely needed to find a camp spot in the next 30 to 40 minutes.
Get me some brand new shoes tomorrow.
Everyone was extremely tired from the additional climbing and the wrong turn we had made, but I insisted we pushed on to find a good spot as we were close to the high point of this section of the trail. Eventually we stumbled upon this amazing viewpoint, which became the spot where we would set up camp for the night.
When I took off, I was gone, gone like a turkey running through the corn. Just
Check
like
this shit
a
out.
cloak, hidden across the
Pretty
woods,
solid,
and I
right?
had to go. I've been going down the highway.
Looking back at the day, we covered 55 miles by bike and climbed a total of 5,580 feet. Our elevation loss was 7,400 feet, so about 2,000 feet more going downhill. And our moving time was 6 hours and 42 minutes. Total time was 9 hours and 22 minutes, with an average speed of 8.4 miles per hour moving speed. This would be our largest day of the entire trip, so we were quite tired, set up camp quickly, and made some food to rest up for the next day. Day 3 began with coffee and hot chocolate in bed as the sun rose from the eastern horizon. I also made the remainder of my dried food, which was an egg scramble and would hopefully sustain me through the morning as I had limited calories remaining. As our elevation was about 5,000 feet, the temps were definitely warmer than the previous night. We took some time to relax, pack up camp, and eventually hit the trail around 9 a.m. The trail started along the edge of the cliff we camped on, with great views and mostly descended for the first 5 miles. This area is loaded with single track and double track, which creates many routing possibilities. We decided to follow a route that very closely matches the actual Kokopelli trail. While this is not the most scenic option, it was generally the most direct way to get to the end of the trail. With part of our group needing to drive an additional 4 hours back to Denver this evening, we agreed this was the best path forward to ensure we had enough time to complete the approximately 30 miles and 3,200 feet of climbing we had ahead of us. Following this route led us onto the western rim double track segment of the Kokopelli. This began with gentle rolling hills until we arrived at more technical terrain overlooking the Colorado River. At this point in time, there is an option to join up with the Western Rim single track trail. I've ridden this trail many times before and can say it is well worth adding on if you have the time. Given our agenda though, and the fact we had limited food and water remaining, we continued on the double track to Rabbit Valley. At this point in time, having biked approximately 100 miles, we officially crossed over the Utah border into Colorado. This area is called Rabbit Valley, which is a very popular weekend recreation area in Colorado. As it was a Monday though, we did not see any other people until we got much closer to the highway. With 2.5 days of bike packing in our legs at this point in time, we were definitely starting to feel it. I was also down to the last bits of food that I had packed for this trip. Starting with 15,000 calories, I only had about 500 remaining. In addition, I only had about 2 liters of water left. That said, this wasn't too much of a concern as we were approaching the highway, and then we only had about 15 easy miles remaining before we arrived at the parking lot where we had dropped Joe's truck at the beginning of the trail. This next bit was a popular dirt bike trail that eventually ran into an easy gravel road that paralleled Interstate 70. As everyone was quite tired at this point in time, we rode along in mainly silence and thought back to the route we planned for this trip. Even though many people ride the Kokopelli trail from Fruita to Moab, we think the way we rode this route was more enjoyable. While I can understand wanting to pedal the entire length of the trail, the option of getting a shuttle out of Moab to reduce the amount of climbing you would need to do is very nice. This also makes it possible for fit riders to do the trail in under 3 days. If driving from Denver, you also have an easy option to cache water along the route on your way to Moab. Riding at this time of year and beginning around 9 a.m. each day means that the sun will generally be at your back, as well as the prevailing westerly winds. And as a final point, the trail felt equally technical, going both ways. So if you're planning to ride the Kokopelli, I can imagine it will be enjoyable riding either direction, but there are more benefits, in our opinion, to riding from Moab to Fruita. Here we are getting on to the last 4 miles of single track for the entire trail. This quickly turned into the most chunky and technical sections of our entire ride. There were several times we needed to get off our bike, walk down the hill, and generally be cautious to not injure ourselves with limited time remaining. After Austin and I got to the bottom of this section, we were waiting for a few minutes and realized that Jordan and Joe had not caught up to us. So as I had reception, I decided to give Joe a call and see if he'd pick up.
Hi, this is Joe Pisa. I'm unable to get to the phone right now.
Pisa? I've been saying Pesa this whole time.
Joe had unfortunately rolled an ankle in the technical section leading up to this segment, but it wasn't that bad of an injury, and thankfully we were able to continue on without too much of an issue. This part of the Kokopelli Trail continued to be extremely technical and demanding. We were on and off the bikes many times, as many sections were unrideable with bikepacking rigs. The trail descended rapidly to get to the Colorado River. We eventually crossed the river on the bridge, and then would need to immediately climb right back up.
Oh. Come not.
This last bit of single track was the Troy-built trail, which would eventually connect back to the road, and we would be only a few miles out from our final destination. Today we would cover a total of 30 miles with 3,200 feet of climbing and 3,500 feet of descending. Our total moving time for the day was 3 hours and 45 minutes, while our total time on the bike was 4 hours and 50 minutes. Our average moving speed was 7.8 miles per hour. For this entire 3-day trip, we biked 127 miles and climbed 14,900 feet. Our total time biking was 21 hours and 54 minutes, and our total moving time was 15 hours and 52 minutes.
Last 5.9 miles.
Our final challenge was going to be to fit all 4 of our bikes into Joe's truck somehow and make it to Fruita, where I was staying for a few more days. Thankfully, we did not need to do this, as we ran into a nice couple at the trailhead who offered to give 2 of us a ride to town. Before parting ways, we got some well-deserved beers and food. While it can be sad when adventures like this come to an end, it is exciting to have completed this amazing trail and to dream of the next bikepacking trip.